You are the woman who most deserves the most beautiful ring in the world. Let's stay together forever." Hearing my husband's sweet voice drifting over from the next table, I quietly set down my cup of Earl Grey tea. In the hushed, elegant atmosphere of that upscale French restaurant in Chicago's Gold Coast, the soft notes of a live piano playing in the background filled the air. Today was October 15th, the day of our 20th wedding anniversary. However, the person sitting across from my husband, who was currently holding a glass of the most expensive champagne on the menu, was not me. It was an unknown woman wearing a vibrant red dress, much more striking and glamorous than anything I had ever worn. Hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat and a large shawl that covered half my face, I smiled slowly. I didn't have a single drop of sadness left in me. Only the cold touch of an object kept in my purse kept me completely serene. In 30 minutes, when that woman looked at the inside of the ring with a grin from ear to ear, it would all be over. "Oh, Vance, you make me so happy. This is the first time I've ever been to such an incredible restaurant." The mistress pronounced my husband's name with a sickly sweet voice. Lorelei, 32 years old, a receptionist at one of my husband's client firms. I knew her face, her name, and the address of her apartment perfectly. For the past 3 months, the private detective I hired had meticulously informed me of her every move. "For you, this is nothing, Lorelei. Besides, my real estate firm is going to post the highest profits in its history this quarter. You are my lucky charm." Vance, his face slightly flushed, puffed out his chest with sheer arrogance. Hearing those words, I almost let out an exhausted sigh. The highest profits in its history. That wasn't Vance's doing. It was the result of the relentless effort of the senior directors who broke their backs adjusting the finances in the shadows, bowing their heads to their oldest clients. But he was utterly convinced it was his own personal triumph. Surely in his mind, there wasn't the slightest memory of my existence left of when I handled the company's bookkeeping entirely on my own, spending countless sleepless nights balancing the ledgers. I recalled what had happened that very morning. Vance had meticulously styled his hair in front of the mirror, and instead of the tie I had gifted him for his birthday, he had put on a flashy designer tie I didn't recognize. "I have a very important business dinner tonight. I might close a massive contract. I'll be late, so don't save me any dinner and go to bed early." He said it without looking me in the eye even once. "All right, have a good day. Good luck with work." I saw him off with my usual pleasant smile. I knew perfectly well that not a single word of congratulations for our 20th anniversary would cross his lips. The Vance of the past was different. 20 years ago, when we had just gotten married, he was a simple office worker at a small manufacturing plant on the outskirts of Chicago. His salary was meager, and we barely made ends meet. On our first anniversary, he took me to a modest neighborhood diner and, with shy hesitation, handed me a silver ring that barely cost a few dollars. "I'm sorry, this is all I can afford to buy you right now, but I promise you that someday I'll be the CEO of my own company, and I'll buy you a ring 100 times more expensive. Please, always stay by my side and support me." I still remember the awkward but sincere look in his eyes back then. Believing in those words, I continued to support him. When he branched out and founded his own real estate brokerage, I invested every penny of my life savings. Despite having to live with my mother-in-law, Opal, and endure her daily contempt, I held on with all my strength so that Vance could focus entirely on his business. But as the company grew and people started calling him CEO, something began to twist inside him. He started coming home late, his tailored suits reeking of expensive nightclub perfume and cigar smoke. His attitude toward me turned ice cold, treating me as if I were merely a convenient maid to have around the house. "Say, Vance, do you really get along with your wife?" Lorelei's voice snapped me back to reality. She tilted her head slightly, looking at him with pleading eyes. "You mean Thalia?" "Ugh. She's just a roommate at this point. All she thinks about is taking care of my mother and doing household chores. She doesn't have an ounce of appeal left as a woman. She's not someone who makes my heart race just by being in the same room, like you do." Vance dropped those words without the slightest hesitation, swirling his wine glass. "Just a roommate," I whispered it in my mind. More than anger, I felt an immense hollow void hearing such predictable words. If I had been the Thalia from a year ago, maybe I would have jumped out of my seat, crying and screaming at him for his betrayal, throwing everything I had done for him in his face. But the Thalia of today was different. My tears had completely dried up. If I was sitting at this adjacent table, it wasn't to make a cheap scene by catching my husband red-handed. I was here to witness in silence, from a front row seat, the culmination of 20 years of my life and the exact moment they would begin their freefall. A waiter wove his way through the tables and placed a beautifully decorated dessert plate in front of Vance and Lorelai. "Wow, how gorgeous!" Lorelai exclaimed in awe. Resting next to the dessert was a small velvet box. Vance, wearing a smile brimming with overconfidence, picked it up. "Lorelai, we've only known each other for 6 months, but since I've been with you, I feel like I've been reborn. I want you to accept this." Vance opened the box slowly. Even under the dim lighting of the restaurant, the diamond inside flashed with blinding brilliance. A top-tier cut that wouldn't cost a dime under tens of thousands of dollars. "I can't believe it, Vance. Is this for me?" Lorelai covered her mouth with both hands, her eyes watering, trembling with joy. "Go on, put it on. The size should be perfect." Encouraged by him, Lorelai took the ring out with shaky hands and slid it onto the ring finger of her left hand. "It fits perfectly. It feels like a dream. Do I really deserve to be this happy? Of course. You are the most important person to me." As I watched their sickeningly sweet exchange, I took a sip of my tea. It was completely cold and terribly bitter. Lorelai couldn't stop looking at her finger, overflowing with happiness. Then, suddenly, she took the ring off, held it up to the light, and squinted at the inside of the band. "Hey, Vance, it looks like there's something engraved inside. Is it in English? It's really small. I can't quite read it." Lorelai narrowed her eyes. Vance also looked confused. "Engraved? I didn't ask them to put any inscription on it. It must be the brand's logo." "No, that's not it, Vance." Beneath my hat, I offered a smile made of pure ice. "The jewelry store where you had ordered that ring was the business now run by the owner of the small watch shop where we bought our first silver wedding bands. The jeweler is an old friend of mine. You didn't know that you falsified expenses to buy that ring with company money to gift to your mistress, did you? And you also didn't know that, before it was delivered to you, I asked my friend to engrave some very specific words on it. Look. Do you see it? It says." Lorelai tried to slowly read the words inside the ring. In that instant, the sweet smile vanished from her face like a receding tide. Her previously flushed cheeks turned waxen pale, and the ring slipped from her fingers, clattering onto the table with a cold, metallic ting. Vance stared at her, stunned, unable to comprehend what had just happened, as he looked at Lorelai's horrified expression. I watched the scene in silence from behind my shawl. I stood up slowly and headed toward the exit of the restaurant. I had no intention of speaking to them right now. My goal wasn't to insult them in public or cause a scene. The crisp night breeze cooled my burning cheeks. I got into a taxi, and as I watched the lights of the Chicago skyline blur past the window, I let out a deep sigh. If I had told my friends about this, they all would have told me to divorce him immediately and take him to the cleaners for a massive alimony check. I had plenty of proof of his infidelity in the detective's reports, but a 20-year bond isn't something so light that it can be severed with a simple piece of paper. Deep inside me burned the pride of a wife that I couldn't just abandon, and a silent, heavy obsession that I wasn't going to let these 2 decades be in vain. The place I was returning to was an imposing mansion located in the quiet, exclusive suburb of Winnetka, Illinois. An enviable estate in anyone's eyes, built thanks to the rapid growth of Vance's real estate firm. But to me, that place was nothing more than an ice prison. Opening the front door, the smell of antiseptic and that characteristic musty scent of the elderly assaulted my nose. "Thalia, you're so late. I was dying of thirst." From the living room sofa, the shrill voice of my mother-in-law, Opal, greeted me. Opal was 75 years old. Ever since she fell in the house 5 years ago and fractured her hip, she found it difficult to walk on her own and depended on me for almost all her daily needs. I took off my coat in a hurry, washed my hands, and prepared her a hot cup of tea. "I apologize, Opal. The grocery shopping took a bit longer than expected." "The grocery shopping? I'm sure you were just wasting time at that cheap discount supermarket you always go to. My Vance is a CEO. You should take better care of your appearance and behave in a way that doesn't embarrass our family." Opal took the mug I offered, looking at me with disdain as she spat her venom. I woke up at 5 a.m. every day, prepared special low-sodium meals for her hypertension, and helped her with everything from using the bathroom to bathing, all without a single complaint. It wasn't rare for my back to scream in agony, waking me up in the middle of the night with sharp spasms. Yet, in these 20 years, not a single word of gratitude had ever left Opal's mouth. You should be grateful you were able to marry into this family, being an uneducated woman who was just a grocery store cashier. Vance is too kind-hearted. That's why he picked you up off the street. Opal never liked my background. At family gatherings, she would blatantly say that her son could have found a high-society girl far more suited for him. Despite having mobility issues and not even being able to use the restroom without my help, her abnormal pride and her attitude of utter contempt toward her daughter-in-law hadn't changed. I hadn't married imagining days like this. 20 years ago, in a cramped 300-square-foot apartment, I remembered the image of Vance handing me that cheap silver ring. Someday I'll be a great businessman and make you the happiest woman in the world, so please, always support me. Believing in that clumsy marriage proposal, I dedicated my entire youth to him. When Vance went independent, I worked mornings as a cashier at a local grocery store and spent my nights helping him with his company's accounting without charging a single cent. There were many sleepless nights spent balancing the books, where a discrepancy of a single dollar wasn't allowed. I even handed over the $20,000 I had saved up before we got married so he could use it as seed capital for the business. Thalia, this is all thanks to you. You are my savior. Vance had grabbed my hands and cried as he said it. I still wanted to believe those tears were real. However, when the company started doing well and the headcount grew, Vance gradually changed. You don't need to do the bookkeeping anymore. From now on, I'll hand it over to a professional CPA. You don't need to come into the office. Just stay home and take care of my mother. That was the moment he forcibly severed my ties to society and turned me into the family maid. To Vance, who cared about appearances more than anything else in the world, I was just an ornament, the devoted wife who dutifully cared for his elderly mother. On the nights I collapsed in tears from my mother-in-law's cruel remarks and the sheer exhaustion of caregiving, Vance would turn his back on me and say coldly, "My mother is old. Have a little patience. I exhaust myself making money out there. Just handle the house stuff on your own and leave me in peace." Since that day, I stopped expecting anything from him. The love had frozen over a long time ago. I buried my trust in him as a husband, and my efforts to get closer to my mother-in-law deep in my heart. The only reason I hadn't slapped divorce papers in his face was that I couldn't forgive the fact that, after stripping me of everything and using me as a servant, they would continue living their happy lives. If I left the house without a word, Vance would tell everyone that his wife had fled her caregiving responsibilities and would immediately move that young, pretty mistress in as his new wife. My last 20 years would end up being just a useless stepping stone. I utterly refused to accept such a pathetic ending. When I walked out of this house, it would be after settling the score for everything they had stolen from me and showing them the harsh reality. That's why I swore to myself that I would keep wearing the mask of the perfect, submissive wife. However, in the midst of those days of despair, where I repressed my emotions, there was an incident that ignited the final spark in my heart. It happened 3 months ago. As usual, I was checking the pockets of the suit Vance had tossed in the hamper before taking it to the dry cleaners. Suddenly, a faint scent of sweet perfume hit my nose. It wasn't mine. It was an intense floral fragrance, the type young girls wear. From the inner pocket of the jacket fell a thin, folded piece of paper. It was a receipt from a luxury hotel restaurant on the Magnificent Mile. But what left me paralyzed wasn't the $300 total for the dinner, nor the name of the hotel. It was the company name printed on the invoice and, above all, the scribbled letters in Vance's handwriting on the back of the paper. A $300 receipt with a faint trace of pale pink lipstick. On the back, unmistakably, was my husband's handwriting, which I had looked at for decades. Slush fund, penthouse down payment, and birthday trip. The moment I saw those words, I felt the blood turn to ice in my veins. When I handled the company's accounting alone, there was no suspicious slush fund. Back then, we had decided not to waste a single cent of the company's money, allocating everything to employee salaries and investments for growth. We used to hesitate even over buying an office pen, managing the funds with desperate care. But this note could only mean one thing. Vance had created a hidden account to illegally siphon funds from the company to maintain his mistress. It wasn't a simple case of infidelity. He was betraying the company we had built with blood, sweat, and tears, and the employees who worked honestly for it. My hands shook with rage. Yet, I took several photos of the receipt with my phone camera, folded it exactly the same way, and silently slipped it back into the inner pocket of his jacket. If I demanded explanations now, he would surely invent a cheap lie to wriggle out of it. I needed to gather concrete evidence before he destroyed it. The next morning, Vance sat at the dining table with his usual sour expression. "Hey, Thalia, this soup is a bit bland. I always tell you I prefer it with more flavor." "I'm sorry. Because Opal has high blood pressure, I make it low sodium," I replied calmly. Vance let out a heavy sigh and dropped his spoon. "Can't you just make my mother's food separately from mine? You spend all day cooped up in the house. You must have free time. Oh, and lately the household expenses are way too high, right? I'm going to give you less money this month. It costs me a lot to maintain the company's public relations." With what face was he telling me this? The man who blew $300 on a dinner with his mistress and was about to gift her a diamond ring worth tens of thousands of dollars, lecturing me on austerity. "It's true, Thalia. You're just a terrible manager," Opal chimed in from the sofa. "Vance is a great businessman. It's normal for him to have expenses outside the house. By the way, I saw a new massage chair on TV that I want. They say it costs about $5,000. You'll buy it for me, won't you, Vance?" "Sure, Mom. Whatever you ask for." "Thalia, order the catalog later." Vance was always extremely accommodating to his mother, who never stopped idolizing him. "Thank you so much. My son is definitely the only one I can rely on. Not like a certain daughter-in-law who looks like a starving peasant. It's ridiculous." Opal laughed at me with triumphant disdain. A $5,000 massage chair, while cutting hundreds of dollars from my monthly grocery budget. As Vance stood up and walked past me toward the door, I caught the same intense, sweet perfume from the night before. I simply carried the dirty plates to the sink in silence. That afternoon, taking advantage of the fact that my mother-in-law had gone to her adult daycare center and the house was completely silent, I called a middle-aged man. Merritt. He was one of the most senior directors who had shared the pains and joys since Vance founded the company. He was a man of few words but deeply honest. And back when I did the accounting, we were like comrades in arms. Many times, the three of us would spend the night eating sandwiches while we worked. "Thalia, it's been a long time." Merritt's voice on the other end of the line sounded terribly exhausted. "Merritt, I'm sorry to call you so suddenly. Could you spare a moment?" After a bit of hesitation, we agreed to meet at an old diner near the company. An hour later, Merritt appeared at a corner booth, his hair almost completely white and dark circles deeply etched under his eyes. I was very surprised. "We hadn't heard from you in years, Thalia. I truly am sorry. I needed to ask you something, Merritt." I lowered my voice, looking around. "I'll get straight to the point. Is something strange going on with the company's money?" Hearing my words, Merritt's shoulders flinched, and he set his coffee mug down sharply on the saucer. "You figured it out, didn't you?" Merritt let out a deep sigh and began to speak with an anguished expression. "The truth is, for the past year, under the CEO's orders, there's been a series of irregular expenses. Every month, tens of thousands of dollars disappear under the guise of fake consulting fees or inflated representation costs. When the accounting department asks for explanations, the CEO starts yelling, saying it's his company and no one should interfere. At this rate, we don't know if we'll be able to pay out the holiday bonuses. The younger employees are scared and are starting to resign." So that was it. Vance was willing to destroy his own company to maintain his lifestyle with the mistress who stroked his ego. Merritt, does the name Slush Fund ring a bell regarding those transfers? Slush Fund? No. There is no account by that name in the company's official books, he said, tilting his head. I understand. Thank you for telling me, Merritt. Let me look into the company's situation a bit. Thalia, has something happened with the CEO? Don't worry. Leave it in my hands. I promise you I won't let you all end up on the street. I promised him that and left the diner. Arriving home, with silent determination, I opened the door to Vance's home office on the second floor. Normally, I didn't enter this room except to clean, because Vance had strictly forbidden me from touching anything, claiming he kept vital company documents there. I knew his character perfectly. He was a braggart, but careless when it counted. He had a habit of always hiding important things within arm's reach. Behind the bookshelf, in the desk drawers, under the rug. After searching for an hour, I noticed a strange gap at the back of the bottom drawer of his desk. Carefully lifting the false bottom panel, I found a black folder and a bank passbook I didn't recognize. Feeling my heart beat faster, I opened the passbook. The account holder wasn't Vance or the company, but what truly made my blood run cold was a contract tucked in next to the book. The moment I saw the cover of that contract, I couldn't believe my eyes. It didn't just have the mistress's name. Seeing the cover of the real estate purchase agreement he had hidden beneath the unknown bank book, I held my breath. It detailed the address of a luxury penthouse in Streeterville, Chicago, with a purchase price of over $1.2 million. In the buyer's box was my husband's name, Vance. But what made me tremble with sheer terror and rage was the box below it. Joint guarantor. Co-signer. Thalia. My name was clearly printed there. The handwriting was unmistakably Vance's. And next to my name was the notary's seal, a copy of my driver's license, and an audit trail confirming an electronic signature using my social security number and DocuSign credentials, which he had stolen from me. I felt the blood drain from my body, and my fingers turned ice cold. Behind my back, Vance had forged my signature and stolen my identity to make me the co-signer for $1 million debt. If the company went under, as Merritt had said, and Vance couldn't pay the mortgage, that enormous debt would fall entirely on me. Furthermore, in the collateral section of the contract, the address of the very house we lived in now was listed. Vance was using the wife who had stood by him for so many years as a human shield to buy a love nest for his mistress, and he was trying to rip away even the home I had protected for so long. "You've rotted to the core," I murmured with a dry voice. I didn't feel an ounce of sadness, only an unfathomable contempt and an almost lethal resolve that I must never forgive this man. A feeling that began to form like a black cloud deep in my chest. I took out my cell phone and, holding it firmly with both hands so they wouldn't shake, I took numerous photos of the entire contract and the inside of the bank book. The ledger showed a raw history of how company money was fraudulently transferred and vanished into the penthouse down payment and luxury store purchases. All of this would be a powerful weapon that would undoubtedly back Vance into a corner later. I finished photographing all the evidence and put the contents of the drawer back exactly as they were before leaving the office. That night, past 1 a.m., the sound of the front door opening abruptly echoed through the house. "Hey, Thalia, I'm home." Vance, reeking of alcohol, stumbled into the living room while loosening his tie. "Welcome back. I'll get you some water right now." Showing not a hint of the rage I felt from seeing the contract, I put on my usual mask of the submissive wife and greeted him. I'm exhausted. I closed another incredible deal today. Without me, that company couldn't function." Vance dropped heavily onto the sofa, laughing arrogantly. He chugged the glass of water in one gulp and fell asleep almost instantly, snoring loudly. His suit jacket slipped untidily toward the floor. Half of a black smartphone peeked out of his pocket. I coldly observed Vance's sleeping face on the sofa. On the face of this man, sleeping with his mouth half open, there was no trace left of the person who swore to make me happy 20 years ago. He was just a middle-aged, ugly man blinded by greed. Without making a sound, I slowly pulled the phone from his pocket. When I tapped the screen, it asked for the unlock passcode. Knowing Vance's character, it was impossible for him to have set a complex password. His favorite number? Without hesitation, I typed 0825 Vance's own birthday. The screen unlocked with ridiculous ease. I immediately opened his text messages. The pinned conversation at the top was with a contact named Lorelei. The profile picture was a selfie of her in that red dress. Opening the chat screen, I witnessed a series of nauseatingly sweet conversations that made me want to vomit. Lorelei, "Vance, the diamond ring we looked at today was so beautiful. I've always dreamed of one like that. Vance, I'll buy you only the best, Lorelei, because you are my treasure. Lorelei, oh my God, I'm so excited. When are you going to buy it for me? Vance, next month, when I close a massive deal at work. Keep October 15th open. I'll make a reservation at the best restaurant and give it to you there. October 15th. Seeing that date, my hand gripping the phone tightened with fury. October 15th was the day of our 20th wedding anniversary. He was going to use our anniversary as an excuse to celebrate giving a tens of thousands of dollars ring to his mistress. It was surely his most despicable calculation yet, using his anniversary with his wife as a pretext not to come home until late, or even spend the night out, without raising suspicions at the company or in our social circles. As I scrolled through the screen, I took photos of the conversations with my own phone. Promises of trips with the mistress, insults directed at me, confessions of how he cooked the company's books. It was all recorded there. Lorelai. But doesn't your wife suspect anything? If she finds out you only spend your money on me, she's going to get mad, right? Vance's response to that message surpassed my imagination in its cruelty. Vance, don't worry. That idiot doesn't notice a thing. I have the deed to the house and control of everything in my power. Plus, all the joint savings in her account, I'll move to my secret account next month. Lorelai. Ooh, so your wife is going to be left penniless. Ha ha ha. Vance. Who cares? I've fed her with my money for 20 years. Once my mother's care is a bit more settled, I'll invent some excuse and throw her out on the street. She's just a maid. Lorelai, wait for me just a little longer. With the money from selling this house, I'll buy you a much bigger penthouse. Throw me out of the house penniless and start a new life with his mistress using that money. That was Vance's master plan for me, the woman who had supported him for 20 years, and who even wiped his mother's ass. So that's what you have in mind. Well, I have my plans too. I laughed soundlessly in the darkness of the living room. I didn't shed a single tear. I only felt a cold, knife-sharp emotion taking shape within me. At that moment, the screen of Vance's phone lit up with a notification for a new message. It was 2 a.m. It was Lorelai. Lorelai. Are you awake? I can't wait for October 15th. Before coming to the restaurant, make sure your wife has signed those documents we talked about. If not, I won't accept the ring. I instantly understood what those documents meant. I turned off the phone and discreetly slipped it back into Vance's pocket. Outside, the cold autumn wind rustled the trees. The die was cast. First thing in the morning, I would have to go see a certain someone. The next morning, as usual, I woke up at 5 a.m. and slipped out of bed without making a sound. The conversation with the mistress I had seen on Vance's phone last night and the unbelievable contracts I found in the office swirled in my head, but my expression in the mirror was surprisingly cold and calm. I went downstairs and started preparing breakfast for Opal. Low-sodium food, dry toast, and a light broth. This routine, which I had repeated without fail a single day for 20 years, was about to end. Thinking about it infused a mysterious strength into my hands as I gripped the kitchen knife. At 7 a.m., Vance appeared in the dining room yawning, clad in an expensive suit. Morning, Thalia. I have a business dinner tonight, so I'll be late. Oh. And by the way, Vance took a sip of his coffee and, looking slightly away, continued, tonight when I get back, I need you to sign some documents. It seems that for the renewal of the company's liability insurance, they need the wet signature and ID of the spouse. Have it all ready. I nodded slightly, my back to him. Sure, I understand. I'll leave it on the table. I laughed coldly to myself. It was obvious this was the document Lorelai had mentioned the night before. Surely, an addendum to cement me as the joint guarantor of $1 million loan, or a spousal waiver of assets. Don't forget, it's a fundamental procedure to protect my company. Vance, convinced he had completely fooled me, walked out the door, sporting a mocking smirk. A suffocating silence returned to the house. However, that silence was soon broken by the shrill sound of the call bell ringing from my mother-in-law's bedroom upstairs. Ring, ring. Thalia, how long are you going to make me wait? I took a deep breath, placed the breakfast on a tray, and climbed the stairs. Opening the door, Opal, half sitting up in bed, glared at me with a look of terrible foul temper. You're so slow. What kind of nerve does a mere daughter-in-law have to make her sick mother-in-law wait so long? I am so sorry, Opal. I'll set your food up right now. I tried to place the tray on the nightstand next to the bed. In that instant, Opal intentionally swatted my arm away. The tray lost its balance, and the bowl of hot broth slipped, crashing to the floor right at my feet with a dull thud. The boiling liquid spilled mercilessly over my insteps, covered only by socks. A searing pain shot through me, but I gritted my teeth and held back a scream. Oh, honestly, you've always been useless. Because you were raised by poor parents who only owned a dingy corner grocery store, you have no manners. My Vance is a respected CEO. An uneducated woman like you could have never entered this family if it wasn't for him. There it was again, Opal's habitual custom of insulting my late parents. My parents, who ran a humble grocery store, worked from dawn to dusk, getting their hands dirty to raise me. Even though we struggled, they were the most honorable people and taught me to live with integrity. In the past, every time she mocked them, I shed tears of frustration and endured it in silence. But the Thalia of today was different. I began to silently clean up the mess on the floor with a rag. While I was kneeling and scrubbing the floor, Opal looked down at me and threw out even crueler words. "By the way," Vance told me, "he says he's going to sell this old house and buy me a much bigger and more beautiful penthouse with full-time staff." Hearing that, my hand, which was holding the rag, stopped dead. A penthouse? That's right. And besides, a lovely girl who recently joined Vance's company, someone named Lorelei, said she wants to take care of me. The other day, she came to introduce herself and brought incredibly expensive gifts. She was a wonderful girl, cheerful and very well educated, unlike a gloomy daughter-in-law like you. I hope that girl soon becomes the daughter-in-law of this house. With Opal's words, I understood everything. Vance and Lorelei had already put my mother-in-law in their pocket. It was impossible that the young Lorelei was actually going to wipe the ass of such a difficult and malicious old woman. Her only goal was Vance's money, and to occupy the position of the CEO's wife once I was kicked out. Vance had surely planted the idea in his mother's head. If we kick Thalia out, the young Lorelei will be delighted to take care of you. And Opal, blinded by the fake smiles of a young woman who fed her ego, was fully complicit in the plan to throw me out of my own home. For 20 years, I had sacrificed my life to protect this house. When Vance was on the verge of bankrupting the company, it was I who bowed my head and borrowed money from all our relatives. When Opal fractured her hip and couldn't go to the bathroom alone, it was I who bathed her and cleaned her feces every day instead of Vance, who wouldn't come near her, saying it smelled bad. Despite everything, these people laughed at all my sacrifices and were ready to throw me away like garbage for the fake promises of a young mistress. More than anger, I felt a profound sadness. And, finally, a feeling of absolute detachment. I see, so Lorelei is a very kind person. Then you can rest easy, Opal. I responded with a voice, from which I had completely repressed any emotion. Of course. You should start packing your things little by little, too. You're mistaken if you think you're going to be able to cling to this family forever. Opal scoffed triumphantly. I bowed silently and walked out of my mother-in-law's room. My steps as I walked down the stairs were strangely light. I had no doubts anymore. There was no need to have even a shred of pity for this family. They themselves had chosen to trample on my existence and walk the path to ruin. I went back to the kitchen, quickly took off my apron, and changed to go out. I had to see someone today without fail. The only person who could unravel the web of the massive debt Vance was trying to saddle me with and help me prepare my counterattack. I put my cell phone with the photos of the contracts and my ID in my purse and opened the door. The cold autumn wind caressed my cheeks. At that moment, the ringtone of my cell phone chimed faintly in the quiet residential neighborhood. An unknown number appeared on the screen. After hesitating for an instant, I answered. "Hello, this is Thalia." Upon identifying myself, a deep, nostalgic male voice resonated on the other end. "Thalia, it's been so long since I've heard from you." Hearing that voice, I felt the tension gripping me relax just a little. It was the first time I had spoken to him since I married Vance 20 years ago. It was the voice of my benefactor, the man who knew my past, Gideon, a veteran lawyer of 68 years. Gideon was a regular customer at my late parents' grocery store and had helped us tremendously with the complex inheritance paperwork and taxes when they passed away. Since I married and entered Vance's family, Opal had constantly scolded me that I should cut ties with acquaintances from a simple grocery store, which was why I had lost touch with him. "Gideon, I'm so sorry to bother you so early. I'm sorry for leaving a message on your voicemail. Don't worry about it." Hearing your voice sound so distressed, I called you back immediately. "You're having trouble with your husband, aren't you?" His warm concern almost made me burst into tears. To me, who for 20 years had no one to lean on and resisted alone in such a cold house, his words pierced my soul. "Gideon, I desperately need your counsel to save my life and the company I helped build." "Understood. Come to my office immediately. I'll clear my schedule for the entire day for you." An hour later, I was sitting on the sofa in Gideon's downtown Chicago law office. It was a sober room that smelled of books and coffee. Just like before. Before Gideon, who now had whiter hair but the same kind smile, I laid out all the photos I had taken with my phone the night before. The crude conversations with the mistress, the bank records of the slush fund where the money was being diverted, and the contract for the penthouse where my name and forged electronic signature appeared as a co-signer. As Gideon reviewed the documents, his expression hardened. Just how stupid has your husband gotten? Gideon let out a deep sigh, his eyes flashing behind his glasses. Thalia, this isn't a simple case of infidelity. Stealing your identity and social security number to make you a co-signer is outright identity theft and mortgage fraud. And if he's also diverting company funds to another account, that's corporate embezzlement and breach of fiduciary duty. They are setting a terrible trap for you. I know. Tonight, my husband intends to make me sign the final document for that debt, or something similar. Lying to me and saying it's to renew the company's insurance. I recounted the strange attitude Vance had displayed that morning. Gideon crossed his arms, thought for a moment, and pulled a small black device from his desk drawer. It was a hidden voice recorder. Listen, Thalia. Tonight when Vance brings the documents, do not refuse to sign. If you resist, he will get suspicious and find another way to forge it, so sign it. But if I do that, I'll be on the hook for the debt. Relax. Before signing, make sure you turn on this recorder. Ask him clearly. These are the company insurance papers, right? You have to record his voice agreeing and lying to force you to sign. A contract signed under fraudulent pretenses is void ab initio. Furthermore, first thing tomorrow morning, we are going to freeze your credit with the major bureaus and file an identity theft report to revoke that electronic signature authorization. We'll send a certified cease and desist letter to the bank notifying them that the co-signer contract is fraudulent and void. That way, Vance's plan will collapse entirely. Gideon's precise instructions completely cleared the fog of anxiety covering my heart. Gideon, thank you so much. I've been alone for so long not knowing what to do. You were always a very strong girl, Thalia. I know that when you lost your parents, you didn't complain and swallowed your pride to help your husband's company. Enough is enough. You don't have to keep being the victim of those people. I will help you with everything I have to take your life back. At those words, I wept openly for the first time in 20 years. The tears I hadn't shed, no matter how many humiliations I suffered in my in-laws' house, flowed as if a dam had broken. That night, past 10 p.m., Vance returned home. Hey, Thalia, I brought the papers I mentioned this morning. Do you have your driver's license handy? Vance tossed his suit jacket and laid a sheet of paper on the table, visibly excited. Discreetly, I slipped my hand into my apron pocket, pressed the record button on the device Gideon had lent me, and approached the table. The top half of the document was intentionally covered with brochures from another company. Only the bottom signature section was visible. Honey, it's so late. These are the documents to renew the company's insurance that you mentioned this morning, right? I asked, playing the role of the ignorant wife as usual. Vance dodged my gaze for an instant but quickly nodded with a mocking smile. Yeah, exactly. It's an insurance policy, so you and my mother won't struggle if anything happens to me. As the CEO's wife, I need your wet signature right here. The clauses are very complicated, so you just sign here. Silently sharpening my resolve, I took the pen. I understand. How thoughtful of you to care so much for me. I wrote my name fluidly. Perfect, that does it. Vance snatched the document away as if he had obtained a treasure and smiled with satisfaction. I'm going to take a shower. I'll be home a little late tomorrow. As I watched my husband head to the bathroom with a spring in his step, I turned off the recorder in my apron. With this, the first trap was set. The moment he tried to close on the penthouse for his mistress, the bank's underwriting process would paralyze, and he would fall into despair. But my battle didn't end here. I sat on the living room sofa and opened a manila envelope Gideon had handed me when we said goodbye. Thalia, about the records of that slush fund Vance has. There's something that worries me. I used my contacts to dig a little into the background. The lawyer's words echoed in my ears. Inside the envelope were a couple of background check reports. I looked down at the documents and began to read. The next instant, I doubted my own eyes and held my breath. I had believed that the slush fund was where Vance was slowly hoarding the company money he embezzled to maintain his life with the mistress. However, the origin of that money was much more terrifying than I imagined. That massive capital entering the hidden account wasn't company profits. Vance had mortgaged vital company real estate and warehouses assets we had fought tooth and nail to acquire when we were young, to take out loans with predatory interest rates from shady private lenders. The company's finances were already deep in the red. What Vance claimed about posting the highest profits was an absolute lie. The reality was that Merritt and the other directors were performing miracles to keep the company barely afloat, and yet, instead of saving the business, Vance was devouring the remaining assets to go into debt just to keep his mistress. And in another report, the hidden face of the mistress, Lorelei, was detailed in full, a sweet, 2-year-old receptionist. Vance thought she was a pure angel who adored him, but her past was stained black. Lorelei had already destroyed the marriages of 2 other middle-aged, arrogant businessmen using the exact same method. She played on the man's ego, made him buy luxury condos and jewelry, squeezed him to the absolute limit of his net worth. And right before the company went bankrupt, she fenced everything and vanished like smoke. She was, in short, a professional gold digger preying on middle-aged marks. Vance believed himself a powerful man capable of keeping a young woman, but in reality, he had fallen completely into Lorelei's sweet trap and was only going to be picked clean to the bone like a stupid prey. What an idiot, I muttered softly in the empty living room, trembling as I held the report. Before anger, I was overcome by disgust and dismay. The true nature of the man I had supported for 20 years was that of a despicable creature, capable of using his company and his family as shields to go into debt just to keep up appearances. If I hadn't noticed and the guarantor document I signed last night had been accepted, when Lorelei abandoned him and he filed for bankruptcy, that colossal debt would have fallen entirely on me. The next morning, when I brought breakfast to Opal's room as usual, she was in an excellent mood watching her horoscope on TV. Thalia. Vance told me yesterday. Next month, the paperwork for the new penthouse will be finished. There will be a massive guest room there, and a new girl is coming to take care of me. Opal spoke with an exaggeratedly cheerful tone, purposefully trying to mortify me. Oh, really? How exciting, I replied without showing any emotion. Opal scoffed in disgust. Honestly, no matter how much time passes, you're still completely charmless. When the new girl comes, we'll finally say goodbye to such a dreary daughter-in-law. I'll finally have a life worthy of Vance's family. My mother-in-law, who had lived placing importance only on appearances and what others said, if Vance had become a braggart, it was probably due to this mother's abnormal pride. Opal didn't know she was about to become the victim of $1 million debt and lose her home, nor that her son was about to ruin the company, deceived by a young woman. She only dreamt happily of her future in a luxury condo, being adored by a younger woman. Yes, Opal. I'm sure that around this time next month, everything will have changed completely. I bowed silently and left the room. During the morning, I got to work. First, I went to freeze my credit and file the identity theft report, officially revoking any electronic signature authorization. Then I went to Gideon's office, and we drafted the formal documents to void the penthouse contract, a certified letter with full legal validity. If we sent this to the bank and the title company, the guarantor contract I signed the night before would become a useless piece of paper. The loan process would stop dead in its tracks. My preparations were advancing perfectly, but my peace didn't last long. Past 3 p.m., while I was cleaning the house, my cell phone vibrated in my apron pocket. The screen showed the name of Merritt, the company director. Hello? Merritt, what's wrong? When I answered, Merritt's voice sounded frantic and out of breath. Thalia, it's horrible. The CEO suddenly tried to wire all the remaining cash in the company's main operating account to another account. And he's also started demanding advance payments from our oldest clients for this very month. I held my breath. Vance wasn't just trying to extract money for the penthouse down payment or gifts for the mistress. He intended to take the last remaining company funds and flee with Lorelei. Thalia, if the CEO takes that money, we won't even be able to make payroll next month. The company will go bankrupt for sure. On the other end of the line, I heard Merritt's groan of frustration. For someone who had trusted Vance and supported the company for 20 years, it was an overly cruel betrayal. Merritt, calm down. I was surprised by how cold and calm my own voice sounded. When is the wire transfer he's trying to make scheduled for? For October 16th. Next Tuesday, we're receiving a massive deposit from a contract. And he plans to route it directly to the other account. October 16th. He planned to give the ring to Lorelei on October 15th, our anniversary day, at the luxury restaurant. And the next day, run away with all the company's money. All the dots connected into a single line. Understood. Merritt, I will stop him. Please. gather the rest of the board of directors and prepare the evidence of the CEO's fraud. I swear to you, I won't let you end up on the street. Thalia, we are trusting you. It would all end on the night of October 15th. I hung up the phone and looked at the calendar. Just 1 week left. That night, when they raised their wine glasses laughing at me, I would prepare the perfect stage for them. I picked up my phone and searched for a number. It was the number of Orson, the owner of the long-standing neighborhood jewelry store, the shop where Vance had commissioned the diamond ring for Lorelei. Hi, Orson. It's Thalia. It's been a while. Listen. I'm calling to ask for a small favor regarding the ring my husband ordered. I lowered my voice so no one would hear me and slowly outlined my plan. Hearing my words, Orson held his breath for an instant. My husband still didn't know the curse I was going to engrave on that beautiful ring he planned to give his mistress. Sign here. I can't stand living with a woman as boring as you anymore. It happened as I was finishing clearing the dinner table and drying my hands in the kitchen. Vance violently threw a piece of paper onto the living room table. It was a marital settlement agreement, an uncontested divorce petition, and Vance's information was already completely filled out. What is the meaning of this? I asked in a low voice. Vance crossed his arms and shot me a cold, contemptuous look. I'm sure you already suspected. There is a woman I truly love. Next month, I'm moving in with her into a high-security luxury penthouse. So, what we have ends today. There was no trace of guilt in his attitude. His voice was icy, as if he were throwing out an old household appliance. Then, Opal, who was watching television on the sofa, chimed in joyfully. Thalia, finally! Vance told me yesterday, next month, when the penthouse paperwork is finalized, our new young daughter-in-law will come to take care of me. Sign it quickly and get out of here once and for all. Opal didn't care in the slightest that I was losing my home. She was only intoxicated by the fantasy that a young daughter-in-law would come to fawn over her. And there are conditions. Vance pointed his finger at me, adopting an intimidating posture. There will be no division of assets and no alimony. I earned this house and the money in the accounts working as the CEO. You spent more than 15 years not working, lazing around the house, and taking care of my mother. I'm not giving my money to a kept housewife. I'll wire $6,000 to your account so you can get lost. That's more than enough for you. Hearing those words, I almost felt dizzy. When the company was on the verge of bankruptcy, who provided all their savings? When my mother-in-law broke her hip and was bedridden, who sacrificed all their time to care for her 24/7, taking her to rehab and bathing her? Vance had completely erased from his mind the fact that he was able to work freely precisely because I protected the home. You're asking me to leave this house for $6,000? Yes, exactly. But listen closely. Vance dropped even more unbelievable words. The key handover for the new penthouse is at the beginning of next month. Until then, you will commute every day from whatever cheap apartment you find back to this house, and you will handle the meals and the care of my mother exactly as you have until now. Lorelei will be very busy preparing the furniture for the new place. It's the least you can do to repay me for feeding you for 20 years. His selfishness knew no bounds. While they dreamed of a life of luxury in their new home, they intended to exploit me as a free caregiver they had just discarded. That's right. We aren't going to make the new girl clean up my intimate messes, Opal laughed triumphantly. My blood boiled with rage. I wanted to tear that paper to shreds and throw it in his face right now. But I took a deep breath and clenched my fists inside my apron pockets. I couldn't let myself be carried away by emotions. I remembered Gideon's words. Until they were completely overconfident and I had closed all their escape routes, I had to play the role of the pathetic, submissive wife. I understand. Thank you for everything during this time. Repressing all my emotions, I picked up the pen from the table. I signed my name in the corresponding box on the agreement. Perfect! Vance let out a shout of joy seeing that I had signed without resistance. He probably thought, in the end, she's a useless woman who can't say anything if I'm not around. And while we're at it, leave the bank passbook and the debit card you use to manage the household expenses right here. From today on, I'll manage it, lest you take money without permission. All right. I took out the passbook for the joint household account and handed it to him without complaining. Good that you're so docile. I'm going to take a bath. Start looking for a cheap apartment tomorrow. Vance went to the bathroom humming, hugging the divorce agreement and the bank book as if they were a treasure. Opal also nodded, satisfied, and retired to her room. Alone in the dark living room, I smirked coldly. Vance was convinced he had won completely, But there was one thing he didn't know. That very morning, when I went to revoke my electronic signature, I had already filed a contested divorce petition at the courthouse, which would completely paralyze any attempt to process that uncontested mutual agreement. When he took that paper in, they would hand it right back to him saying it was worthless. And regarding the savings account, he snatched with such pride the tens of thousands of dollars that were in there had already been wired entirely to a secure account in my name as part of my legitimate division of premarital assets under Gideon's legal counsel. If Vance tried to withdraw money tomorrow, he would see that only a few cents remained. I won't let you get away with anything. At that moment, my cell phone, which I had left on the table, vibrated briefly. It was an email from the detective I hired. There was a photo attached. The photo showed Vance's mistress, Lorelei. But the man walking next to her wasn't Vance. It was an older man dressed in an incredibly expensive designer suit. Lorelei displayed the same sickly sweet smile she gave Vance, clinging to that man's arm as they entered a luxury hotel in downtown Chicago. The detective's message read, "Lorelei has already contacted her next target. It seems she sensed that Vance's company is in danger and has started to secure her escape route." I let out a small chuckle in the darkness. "Vance, you plan to throw me in the trash to choose your mistress, but your mistress is already preparing to throw you away." Vance's company was in flames, and he kept racking up debt collateralized with the company's assets. Even if he thought he was hiding it well, Lorelei, a professional at squeezing older men, had already noticed the danger. Her plan was to extract as much cash as she could from Vance's sinking ship and, before the company went completely bankrupt, jump to her next rich prey. The next morning, Vance went to the office in a very good mood. Like the night before, I obediently signed and handed over the account. He thought he had absolute control of the situation. He was convinced he was going to submit that agreement to the court to validate it, not knowing it was going to be rejected. After he left, I checked the pockets of his suit before taking it to the dry cleaners. From the inner pocket peeked a crumpled paper. It wasn't a restaurant receipt. It was a receipt from a luxury consignment shop in the Gold Coast. Purchase amount: $1,200. Item: ladies' designer handbag. The date was from just 3 days ago, and the client's name clearly read Lorelei. Seeing the item, a cold laugh escaped me. It matched exactly the bag Vance bragged about buying for her birthday in the text messages I read. Vance embezzled company funds to buy her expensive gifts, but she, while telling him, "It's too beautiful to use. I'll keep it as a treasure," went running to sell it to a secondhand store to get cash for her escape. I didn't know why that receipt was in Vance's pocket. Maybe it fell out of Lorelei's purse, and Vance pocketed it without looking. Either way, it was another perfect piece of evidence of Lorelei's true nature. I smoothed out the paper and carefully stored it in a folder. At 10 a.m., the landline in the house started ringing obnoxiously. Upon answering, Vance's screams pierced my ear. "Thalia, what is the meaning of this? What are you referring to?" I answered calmly, and Vance raised his voice even more. "Don't play dumb. The expense account you gave me yesterday. I went to the ATM to check the balance, and there are only a few cents left. Where are the tens of thousands of dollars in savings?" Imagining my husband's red face flush with rage in front of the ATM, I smiled silently. "Oh, that money. I transferred it to my personal account yesterday." "What? Are you kidding me? I earned that money. You stole it without permission. I'm going to report you to the police as a thief." Facing Vance's ridiculous threats, I responded without flinching in the slightest. "You can go to the police or wherever you want. Yesterday you told me there wasn't going to be a division of assets, right?" "Yes," I said. "A kept woman like you has no right to anything. That's why I only moved what belongs to me." The money in that account was the sum of the $20,000 I had saved before we got married, and what I saved working at the grocery store the first few years. The money you earned disappeared into your company's expenses and your private parties. If you look at the ledger, you'll clearly see they are my premarital separate assets. I've already consulted my lawyer." "Oh, lawyer?" Vance's voice shrank for an instant, but his habitual arrogance surfaced immediately. "Bah, I'm sure some cheap public defender filled your head with nonsense and you think you're so smart. I don't care. Keep that pocket change. Next week, hundreds of thousands of dollars will hit my company account. And furthermore, today my penthouse mortgage will be approved. Enjoy your misery in a rundown apartment with your pocket change." Vance spat those words at me and hung up forcefully. Poor man. He still hadn't realized he was standing on the edge of the abyss. The mortgage for the penthouse he trusted so much had already been blocked by the bank thanks to the certified letter I sent yesterday, revoking my cosigner status. And regarding the company income he planned to flee with, I had taken measures for that too. The phone vibrated in my apron. It was a text from Merritt. Thalia, I just reached an agreement with the entire board. We have all the evidence of the CEO's breach of fiduciary duty and embezzlement. To prevent him from withdrawing the money coming in next week, we used our board powers to divert those receivables to a secure company escrow account. Thank you, Merritt. This is all thanks to you, I replied briefly. With this, all of Vance's escape routes were completely sealed. He wouldn't get the mortgage. He wouldn't be able to take the company money. His uncontested divorce wouldn't be accepted. And his mistress, to whom he had handed everything, would vanish in an instant when she found out he was ruined. The man who had treated me like a maid for 20 years, who had insulted my parents and trampled on my life, the sandcastle he had built was about to collapse. Just a little more. Thalia, come here a moment. I heard Opal's shrill voice from the second floor. Going up to her room, I found Opal sitting in her wheelchair, pulling old clothes and dresses out of the closet and throwing them on the floor. What's wrong, Opal? Why are you making a mess? I'm not making a mess. I'm getting rid of the old. In the luxury penthouse we're moving to next month, these old, musty clothes don't belong. Lorelai promised me she's going to buy me very expensive clothes to match the new house. Opal spoke to me as if she were a little girl daydreaming, telling me her fantasies to make me jealous. You should start packing your things, too. Living in such a nice house has always been too much for you. Starting next month, you'll go back to the peasant life where you belong. Toward this mother-in-law, capable of being so cruel to the daughter-in-law who had cared for her tirelessly, I no longer felt anger, only an abysmal pity. She blindly believed her son was a brilliant CEO. She was convinced a young mistress would care for her with affection. When all those illusions shattered, what face would this proud old woman make? Yes, Opal, don't worry. I'm packing my things little by little, too. I answered with the most serene smile I had ever given her and began to carefully fold the clothes scattered on the floor. By the afternoon, the autumn days grew short, and outside the window it was already starting to get dark. At that moment, my cell phone rang. It was Orson, the jewelry store owner. I slipped into my room so Opal wouldn't hear me and closed the door. Tell me, Orson. Thalia, the ring you asked for is ready. Orson's voice sounded somewhat shaky and bewildered. Thank you so much. I'm sorry for asking you for something so strange. Don't worry. Thinking about everything you've suffered, this is the least I could do. Are you sure you want me to put that exact phrase? Yes. It's the first and last truth I'm going to give that man. I hung up the phone and closed my eyes in silence. I looked at the calendar hanging on the wall. October 14th. Tomorrow would finally be October 15th, our 20th anniversary, the night my husband would hand a diamond ring to his mistress and intend to snatch away my entire life. I softly traced the number 15 on the calendar. The stage was set. Let's go, Vance. I will watch you from the best seat in the house during your grand moment of glory. The morning of our 20th wedding anniversary arrived, boasting a high, clear autumn sky without a single cloud. However, inside the house, there wasn't the slightest hint of celebration. I have a business dinner today. I might close a huge contract. I'll be late, so don't save me dinner and go to bed early. Vance told me this while meticulously styling his hair in front of the bathroom mirror. He wore a loud designer tie that Lorelai had surely picked out. All right, have a good day. Good luck with work. I saw him off with the same calm voice as always. As he put his shoes on in the entryway, Vance turned to me and gave a mocking smile. Before I go to the office, I'm stopping by the courthouse to submit the divorce agreement you signed yesterday. So, as of today, you are just a guest in this house. Until we move next month, you'd better take good care of my mother like the maid you are. He was totally convinced his perfect plan had worked. Yes, be careful on your way. I bowed my head silently. Vance scoffed in satisfaction and opened the door briskly. After he left, I went up to my mother-in-law's room. Opal was already awake, watching TV from bed in a great mood. I brought you breakfast, Opal. Today, I made your favorite low-sodium baked salmon. Well, how nice. Although I suppose Thalia putting up with these bland breakfasts will only be for a little while longer, Opal said, eyeing the tray sideways with joy. Vance told me he was going to the courthouse today. With this, that wonderful Lorelei will finally be the daughter-in-law of this house. When we move to the penthouse next month, she promised to make me breakfasts like a luxury hotel every morning. I can finally say goodbye to your peasant food. Opal's head was full of happy fantasies about the young mistress. I smiled silently. That's right, I'm sure a wonderful life awaits you. I said that and left the room. This was the last breakfast I prepared for my mother-in-law in that house. Coming downstairs, I rolled up my sleeves and began to deep clean the house. I vacuumed, cleaned the windows, scrubbed the hardwood floors with a damp cloth. This house that I had protected, crawling on the floors every day for 20 years. I remembered the joy we felt when we moved here from that small apartment and how we chose the living room curtains together. But, without realizing it, this house had become an icy prison keeping me locked away. Even so, I held no grudge against the house. Because on the nights I cried, this house was the only thing that silently embraced me. Thank you for everything, I whispered as I caressed the shiny floor I had just polished. Finally, I went to the small corner where we kept the photos of our deceased loved ones and lit a candle. I folded my hands, saying goodbye to Vance's family, and promising to start my new life. My job as a wife was over. At 2 p.m., while resting in the living room, my phone rang. It was Merritt. Thalia, is it a good time to talk? Merritt's voice mixed excitement and relief. Yes, no problem. What happened at the company? Everything went according to plan. A little while ago, the CEO tried to wire a massive sum from the main account to another account from his office. But because we had already notified the bank that there were suspicions of fraud by the administrator, the transfer was blocked by a system error. I sighed in relief. With this, the employees' salaries and the vital funds of the company were safe from the mistress's claws. What did Vance say? When he saw the error, he started screaming that the bank system was garbage and that we were all useless. Normally, he would call the bank immediately, but since he has a very important plan today, he said he would deal with that nonsense tomorrow and rushed out of the office. Vance was so fixated on giving the ring that he couldn't think of anything else. He didn't realize the ground was crumbling beneath his feet. Also, Thalia, this morning the bank called asking for the CEO. They informed us that, after receiving a certified letter from his wife, the co-signer contract was voided, therefore they will not grant him the mortgage for the penthouse. I took the call and, obviously, I didn't tell the CEO. Thank you, Merritt. With this, all his plans are destroyed. Thalia, are you sure this is for the best? Yes. Tonight I will put an end to everything. I hung up the phone and took a deep breath. At 4 p.m., I went to my room and pulled a black dress I hadn't worn in years from the back of the closet. I took off my worn-out apron, put on a bit of makeup, and gathered my hair up elegantly. Then I put on a wide-brimmed black hat that covered half my face and draped an elegant shawl over my shoulders. Looking in the mirror, the exhausted daughter-in-law worn out from caregiving was no longer there. The strong Thalia, capable of managing an entire company's accounting and facing any problem, had returned. I packed the voice recorder, the detective's reports, the photos of the infidelity, and my new bank passbook in my purse. Finally, I left an envelope on the living room table. Inside was the notice from the court, informing him that the uncontested divorce agreement Vance had tried to file today had been rejected because I had previously filed a contested divorce petition. Goodbye. I gave a small bow to the house immersed in silence and locked the door. I dropped the key through the mail slot. I would never open that door again. I got into a taxi and gave the destination. The streets of Chicago at dusk passed by the window. 20 years ago, when we were poor, we promised each other that someday we would eat something delicious in a city as beautiful as this. The shy but sincere smile of Vance when he handed me that cheap silver ring. All of that seemed like a distant lie. I no longer knew if he had changed or if he had always been that kind of man. The only certainty was that today, I would get my life back. At 6:30 p.m., I arrived at the entrance of an exclusive French restaurant in one of the best areas of Chicago's Gold Coast. Upon giving the name on the reservation, the host greeted me with utmost courtesy and guided me to a table in the back. Will your companion be arriving later? No, I'm dining alone today. I want to enjoy the meal quietly. As you wish. The table I was assigned was in an excellent spot where I could view the entire dining room under a dim light. I ordered hot Earl Grey tea and closed my eyes silently, without taking off my hat. The live piano music resonated elegantly. The clock struck 7 p.m. At that moment, the heavy glass door opened, and a couple walked in. Vance, sporting an incredibly expensive suit with a firm, confident stride, and next to him, clinging to his arm, Lorelei, in her flashy red dress, dispensing sickly sweet smiles. They were heading toward a table, the table I had casually requested to be seated right next to. I smiled slowly beneath my hat. Vance, surely right now you think you're the luckiest man in the world, with the company's money in your power, throwing your wife out, and planning to live in a luxury penthouse with your new mistress. Do you think your perfect plan is sailing smoothly? Come on, let the main characters take the stage. I lifted my teacup gently. There was very little time left before the waiter brought the desserts, and you pulled out the ring box with a triumphant air. From this front row seat, I will savor the exact moment you plummet into the void. Under the dim light of the restaurant, the flame of the candles flickered softly over the tables. Inside, only the sound of the piano and the clinking of glasses could be heard. At the adjacent table, barely a foot away, Vance and Lorelei had sat down. I pulled the brim of my hat down a bit further and covered my face with the shawl, pretending to look at the night cityscape through the window. Because they were sitting with their backs to me, they didn't seem to have noticed me at all. To them, my existence wasn't even 3 feet away. Vance. What an incredible restaurant. Bringing me to such a special place. I'm so happy, Lorelei said with her shrill voice. Of course, Lorelei. Today will be a very special day for us. You deserve this and more. Vance smiled, believing himself the protagonist of a movie. The waiter approached and poured an exquisite vintage champagne. Vance toasted loudly. To our new life, and to your beauty. Cheers. Cheers. The crystalline sound of glasses clinking resonated. I took a sip of my tea. The bitterness sharpened my senses even more. Hey Vance, are the divorce papers sorted out? Yes. Perfect. First thing this morning, I submitted the agreement to the court. That idiot signed it last night without suspecting a thing. With this, I've cut all ties with that boring, depressing woman. Vance puffed his chest out with pride. She's probably looking for a cheap, run-down apartment with the measly $6,000 I gave her. It's the ending, waiting for a simple, useless housewife who doesn't know how to do anything without me. Only insults toward me came out of his mouth. He treated the woman who had worked for free for his company, who had secured money when he almost went bankrupt, and who took care of his mother, as useless. A long time ago, those words would have shattered my heart, but now I only felt a cold silence. He didn't know that the paper he handed into the court was worthless because I had filed a contested divorce petition. He kept talking about his fake victory. Wow, you're amazing, Vance. Then, we'll finally be free. Lorelei grabbed his hand, her eyes shining. But, did they approve the mortgage for the new penthouse? And that company money you mentioned? If you don't get it, I'm really scared. Lorelei's words revealed her undeniable obsession with money. She knew Vance's company was in flames, which was why she wanted to squeeze out every last cent in cash, the penthouse, and the jewelry before it sank. As the detective's photo showed, she already had another target in her sights. Vance was just her latest wallet. Don't worry. Who do you think I am? I'm the CEO. Vance replied with an arrogant smirk. The bank surely already approved the penthouse mortgage today. Tomorrow, I'll sign the official contract. And about the company money, no problem. Today there was a computer error and the wire was delayed, but tomorrow hundreds of thousands of dollars will hit my personal account. I will give you a life full of luxuries, I promise. Oh, Vance, I love you so much. Lorelei leaned toward him with joy. What a pathetic scene. The mortgage had been denied by my certified letter. The company funds had been blocked and secured by the board. The brilliant future Vance bragged about had already been completely destroyed by my own hands. And the two of them, oblivious to everything, kept talking about sweet dreams of grandeur. But Vance, what's going to happen with Opal? You said there would be a guest room, but I can't take care of her, you know? It would ruin my nails. She pouted. That was her true face, very different from the girl who played nice, promising to care for her. Ah, don't worry about that. Vance spoke with total coldness. I'm going to make Thalia take care of her for a while. I'll make her commute every day from her dump to work like a mule until right before we move. And the very day of the move, I'll stick my mother in that cheap state-run nursing home I found. I'd have to be crazy to bring that crippled old bat to our new love nest. Really? Your mother seemed to trust you a lot. Whatever. Whoever gets in the way of my life, be it my wife or my mother, I just cut them off at the root. I prioritize my own happiness. I gripped my teacup tightly. Just to satisfy his ego, he was going to throw the woman who had dedicated 20 years to him out on the street with no money. And ultimately, he intended to throw his own mother, who adored him, into a cheap nursing home like trash. Opal must be at home waiting anxiously for Vance's return, convinced that her young daughter-in-law was going to treat her like a queen in a luxury penthouse. Vance's true selfish nature was rotten to the core. With this, any minimal doubt I had left vanished completely. He didn't deserve a drop of pity. The tasting menu plates were served and cleared. Vance drank wine and wouldn't stop bragging about how fantastic his company was and how capable he was. Lorelei nodded from time to time, but kept glancing out of the corner of her eye toward the restaurant entrance or her own phone. It was clear her heart had already strayed from Vance and was aiming at her next prey. Still, Vance was intoxicated by that fake smile. "It's about time," Vance muttered, looking at his watch. He gave the waiter a signal with his eyes. With that signal, the restaurant's piano music shifted to a slightly more upbeat melody. I narrowed my eyes beneath the hat. The moment had arrived. The waiter approached their table and placed a dessert plate with elaborate caramel garnishes. "Wow, how gorgeous!" Lorelei let out an overly exaggerated scream of joy. In the center of the plate, red rose petals were scattered, and next to them, a small black velvet box. Vance blushed a little. He put on a smile brimming with confidence and picked up the box. "Lorelei, we haven't known each other long, but I feel like I've been reborn with you. I want you to accept this." I reached into my purse and turned on the voice recorder. Vance slowly opened the box. The diamond inside shone with a blinding light. It was a top-tier ring that had cost him tens of thousands of dollars by falsifying company expenses. "I can't believe it, Vance." Lorelei perfectly played her part of covering her mouth and trembling with joy, her eyes watering. "Go on, put it on." Lorelei put the ring on the ring finger of her left hand with shaky hands. "It fits perfectly. It feels like a dream. Do I really deserve to be this happy? Of course. You are my most important person." Watching that saccharine scene, I took a deep breath. Lorelei kept looking at her finger over and over, thrilled. And then, as if she wanted to check something, she took off the ring, held it up to the light, and looked inside. "Hey, Vance, it looks like there's something engraved inside the ring. It's in English. It's really small, I can't quite read it." I had been waiting for this moment. Vance still didn't know. Inside that ring, there was no phrase of love. What was engraved was the phrase I had asked the jeweler to inscribe to throw them into the depths of hell. When Lorelei narrowed her eyes and began to read slowly, the atmosphere froze. A clear metallic sound rang out in the silent restaurant. Clink. What is this?" Lorelei's lips trembled uncontrollably. The sweet and seductive look she gave Vance had completely vanished. She now stared at the ring that had rolled onto the table as if she had seen a ghost. "Lorelei, what's wrong? Is there a problem with the engraving?" Vance frowned, bewildered by the sudden change in his mistress's attitude. Apparently, due to his poor eyesight, he couldn't immediately make out what was written inside the tiny ring on the table. "Vance, what does this mean? Is this some kind of sick joke?" Lorelei screamed, panicking. Customers at nearby tables turned to see what was happening. "Joke? What are you talking about? I just wanted to make you happy." I stood up slowly. I took off the black hat I was wearing and lowered the shawl that hid my face from my shoulders. My heels clicked silently as I approached their table. "If you drop the ring like that, it'll get scratched, and then the price will drop when you take it to the pawn shop." My serene and cold voice washed over them. Vance and Lorelei looked up at me at the same time, as if they had received an electric shock. "Thalia." Vance's eyes widened, and he moved his mouth like a fish out of water. I saw the blood drain from his face in an instant. "Good evening, Vance, and nice to meet you, Miss Lorelei." I offered a perfect smile and nodded slightly. What are you doing here? Have you been following me, you stalker?" Vance, snapping out of it, yelled at me with a red face, not caring about the stares of the people. "Don't say such ugly things like stalker. Today is October 15th, the day of our 20th wedding anniversary. If my husband is toasting in such a wonderful restaurant, it's only natural for his wife to join him, don't you think?" Without asking anyone's permission, I pulled out one of the empty chairs and sat calmly across from them. "Don't talk nonsense. You and I are finished. I submitted the divorce agreement this morning. Get out of here right now. Vance slammed his hand on the table and tried to stand up. About the divorce. It wasn't accepted. I pulled a document from my purse and slid it across the table. Vance froze. What are you talking about? Before you filed it, I had already submitted a contested divorce petition at the courthouse. Legally, we are still husband and wife. Damn it! How long are you going to keep bothering me? Just as Vance raised his hand to strike me, I glared at him coldly and continued speaking. The one who's bothering people is you. You used my name, my social security number, and forged my electronic signature without permission to put me as a co-signer for a penthouse. That is a very serious federal crime of identity theft and mortgage fraud. Vance's raised hand stayed frozen in the air. I had touched the truth he most wanted to hide. A cold sweat began to break out on his forehead. Through my lawyer, I've already sent a certified letter to the bank and the title company. Your penthouse mortgage has been completely paralyzed. Liar, I'm the CEO. The bank can't deny me a loan. And that's not all. I shoved another document in his face. About the money you were going to wire from the company's main account to another account, the board of directors, led by Merritt, has already spoken to the bank and blocked the funds. Tomorrow, not a single dollar will enter your personal account. The money you used to maintain your mistress and fake solvency was from predatory loans using the company's assets as collateral. The company is on the verge of bankruptcy. Vance's face went from red to blue, and then to an ashen gray. Merritt? Betrayed me? My company. He collapsed into his chair, grabbing his head. Beside him, Lorelei, who had been listening to our conversation, jumped out of her seat. Hey, wait a minute, Vance. What does this mean? The company is going to go bankrupt? You can't buy the penthouse? Lorelei's voice cracked. To her, who had only approached him for the money, the fact that Vance had suddenly become a debt-ridden old man was the worst possible unforeseen event. I have nothing to do with this. Vance came on to me. I'm going home. Lorelei grabbed her designer purse from the table and turned to flee. Just a moment, Miss Lorelei. My calm but firm voice made her stop in her tracks. I have a gift for you from me. I pulled a small envelope from my purse and offered it to her. What is this? Lorelei opened the envelope with shaking hands. From inside, some photos and a piece of paper fell onto the table. The photos showed Lorelei clinging to the arm of another older man entering a luxury hotel, and the paper was the receipt from the Gold Coast luxury consignment shop where she had pawned the bag Vance had gifted her. Ah! The moment Lorelei saw it, she let out a choked scream and covered her face with her hands. As soon as you found out Vance's company was in danger, you had already found your next target. You planned to accept the ring today before he went completely bankrupt and run away, right? Hearing my words, Vance jerked his head up. Lorelei, what is the meaning of this? You said you loved me. Don't touch me, you deadbeat. Lorelei swatted Vance's hand away as if she were looking at something disgusting. A broke, bragging old man like you is worthless. Your wife found everything out and you ruined your company. You're pathetic. The nasty insults from both of them echoed throughout the luxury restaurant. The man who had looked down on me for 20 years was now being trampled and despised as someone utterly worthless by the mistress to whom he had given everything. That scene was the best beginning to my revenge. Wait, Lorelei, wait! Vance tried to cling to her. Stop. I pointed at the ring with the brilliant diamond that had been forgotten on the table. You still haven't seen what's written inside that ring you bought by embezzling money from your own company, have you? At my icy voice, Vance looked startled at the ring on the table. Thalia, what did you do to this ring? Vance picked it up with trembling fingers, squinted, and looked at the engraving inside. He still didn't know that the words carved into that little piece of metal would shatter his pride and his life into 1,000 pieces. Under the dim light, there were small English letters, smaller than a grain of rice, but clearly readable. Bought with embezzled funds. Debt, $1.2 million. Reading those words, the last drop of blood drained from Vance's face. His lips began to tremble. What is this? Why does it say this here? The ring slipped from his hands and rolled across the table again. The diamond, supposedly worth tens of thousands of dollars, now emitted a cold light, as if it were a stone reflecting his own crimes. Surprised? I set my teacup back on the saucer gently and stared at him. The owner of the jewelry store where you ordered the ring is an old friend of my late parents. He's the one who made us those cheap silver rings we bought when we got married. Vance held his breath, dumbfounded. He called me. He told me you had come in with a young girl to buy a diamond ring worth tens of thousands, and that you even tried to pay for it with company funds. So I asked him to do it. I asked him, right before you picked it up, to engrave this truth inside. Thalia, how could you? It was the easiest way to show Miss Lorelei what kind of man you really are. I turned my gaze to Lorelei, who was pale and speechless. Miss Lorelei, you believed this man was a rich and respectable CEO, but I'm afraid it was all a facade. His company is ruined. The designer bags, the hotel dinners, and this ring, he bought everything by taking out predatory loans and using his own company's assets as collateral. It amounts to a debt of $1.2 million. Lorelei let out a scream and took a step back, trembling from head to toe. I didn't know that. Nobody told me anything about debts. I have nothing to do with this. She looked at Vance in disgust. She grabbed her purse again and tried to flee. Of course you have something to do with it. My cold voice pinned her to the floor. All the gifts and money you received from him come from embezzled company funds. I have already set the board of directors and my lawyer, Gideon, into motion. Tomorrow, you will receive a certified letter demanding the return of the stolen money, along with a lawsuit for alienation of affection and emotional distress due to the infidelity. Don't think you can escape. And regarding that older gentleman from the hotel you've set your sights on, I already have a detective tracking his every move. If you try to hide, I will send all the proof of this infidelity and embezzlement to that man. Sound good? Lorelei's knees gave out and she fell to the floor. Leave me alone. I just wanted to live the high life. Why is this happening to me? She covered her face with her hands and began to bawl loudly like a little child. At that moment, there was no trace left of the woman who had called me useless and toasted with champagne triumphantly. It was a pathetic ending. Lorelei, are you going to betray me? Vance yelled at Lorelei, who was sitting on the floor. But Lorelei, crying, yelled back. This is all your fault. If you weren't a lying, debt-ridden loser, none of this would have happened. The restaurant plunged into a sepulchral silence, and the waiters and customers watched the pitiful scene from a distance. The prestige and appearances that Vance valued most were crumbling spectacularly in public. Vance, breathing heavily, turned to me. His eyes swam in panic and despair. The company funds blocked. The dream of the penthouse vanished. His mistress insulting him, and an immense debt of $1.2 million as his only company. Suddenly, he rested his hands on the table and bowed his head toward me. Thalia, I'm sorry. I was wrong. It was all this woman's fault. She seduced me. I was deceived. The man who barely a few minutes ago called me a maid was now begging for his life desperately. You are my wife. We've been together for 20 years, suffering together. Please, don't abandon me. Talk to that lawyer of yours and tell him to stop the board. If you ask them, I'm sure they'll forgive us. I looked down at him and responded with a voice of ice. But didn't you just tell me a little while ago that you had submitted the divorce papers to the court? That they didn't accept that, right? Legally, we're still husband and wife. The husband's debts are also the wife's responsibility. He was selfish and a coward to the very end. I let out a deep sigh, grabbed my purse, and stood up. First, you acquired the company debt personally, fraudulently mortgaging the assets. I have no obligation to pay it. Furthermore, I have already transferred all my premarital assets to a secure account in my name. The only thing I have left is a new life. Wait, and the house? What's going to happen to the house we live in? My mother is there. Vance brought up the existence of his mother as a desperate last card. I stopped before heading to the exit. I glanced back over my shoulder and gave the most sincere smile of the entire day. Oh, don't worry about Opal. When I found out you were going to kick me out and move into a penthouse with Lorelei, she was thrilled. She threw away her old clothes and got ready for the move. That's why, this afternoon, I prepared the best of gifts for her. Vance's face contorted in terror. My husband still didn't know that, while we were here in the restaurant, Opal was being sent to her very own hell, the best of gifts. What did you do to my mother? Vance's voice cracked ridiculously from fear and nerves. What did I do? Well, I fulfilled your plans. Exactly as you wanted. I smiled silently, pulled a trifold brochure from my purse, and let it fall softly at Vance's feet. It was a brochure for a very cheap, decrepit state-run nursing home in downstate Illinois. I found that brochure at the bottom of your drawer. It's the nursing home you already signed a contract with in secret to forcibly commit your mother the day you moved in with Lorelei to the new condo, right? Ah. Vance held his breath and looked away from the brochure. Well, you see, before I left the house today, I called the facility. I told them, my husband's moving plans have moved up. Come pick up my mother-in-law today at 5 p.m. And since you had already paid the admission fee and signed the contract using embezzled company money, the whole process was super fast. Vance's face paled even more. I began to recount what had happened at 5 p.m. at the house. At 5 p.m., a somewhat battered van from the facility arrived. 2 employees in work uniforms went up to your mother's room. She was waiting for them sitting in her wheelchair in the middle of the room, surrounded by trash bags with her old clothes. Convinced that Lorelei was going to buy her expensive dresses for the penthouse. I'm going to my son's penthouse. A wonderful daughter-in-law named Lorelei is going to pick me up, she told them. I remembered my mother-in-law kicking and screaming at that unbelievable reality. The same arrogant old woman who had despised me for my poor origins for 20 years had ultimately been betrayed by her son and expelled to a dump of a nursing home. The nursing home staff were very blunt. The son signed with us. We don't know anything about any penthouse. She started crying and called you 1,000 times, but you had your phone turned off so no one would interrupt your fantastic romantic dinner. Ah! Vance grabbed his head and shrank back onto the floor. The plan to abandon his mother had been hatched by him alone, but he never thought it would be revealed so cruelly right when he was supposed to be savoring glory. Opal, realizing her own son and the young mistress had deceived and abandoned her, collapsed without even being able to articulate a word. And just like that, with only the clothes on her back, she was taken away in the van. That is the end of the mother you cared so much about. When I finished speaking, the restaurant was enveloped in a deathly silence. Vance's appearances, his prestige, his facade of a great CEO. Everything shattered into pieces. Ah! Suddenly, Vance let out a scream like a beast and fell to his knees. Then, he crawled toward my feet, pressing his forehead against the floor in an unbelievable display. Thalia! Thalia, I'm sorry. I was wrong about everything. I'm begging you, forgive me! A middle-aged man, dressed in a designer suit, prostrating himself on the floor, crying and begging in public, his face covered in tears and snot, before the woman he previously despised as a useless maid. I've opened my eyes. That woman tricked me. I've lost the company, the house, my mother. I only have you left. Thalia, help me like in the old days. If you're here, I'm sure we can start over from scratch. Looking down at him, so pathetic, I let out a sigh. There wasn't a shred of anger or sadness left, only absolute indifference toward this man. Vance, you have always been selfish and only cared about yourself. My cold voice fell upon his head. To me, the time when I supported you, and we swore to strive together, even if we were poor, was a treasure. But you, as the company grew, started seeing me only as a useful tool. No matter how much I exhausted myself physically and mentally caring for your mother, you never protected me. I'm just too busy with work. I don't want to hear excuses. I cut him off sharply. The fact that you let yourself be carried away by Lorelei, devoured the company's assets, and tried to make me a co-signer on a debt to kick me out of the house that will never disappear. You killed my existence with your own hands. A dead heart does not come back to life. Faced with my outright rejection, Vance put on a face of total despair and collapsed on the floor. Beside him, Lorelei, who had been crying with her face covered, suddenly stood up. Yes, it's all this man's fault. I didn't do anything wrong. I was the one who was tricked. Lorelei kicked Vance with her stiletto heels while he was still on the ground and hugged her purse. Give me back my 6 months. I slept with you because you said you were the CEO, and it turns out you have more than $1 million in debt. What a broke loser. Keep me out of this. Lorelei yelled that and turned around, ready to run toward the door. However, her escape was interrupted almost immediately. Excuse me, miss. The restaurant manager, a middle-aged man, stepped in Lorelei's path with a calm but authoritative voice. Before you leave, please settle the bill. The tasting menu for 2 and the vintage champagne come to a total of $500. Seeing the black leather billfold the manager handed her, Lorelei's face distorted. Huh? Why should I pay? This man has to pay. He's the CEO for a reason, Lorelei yelled. pointing at Vance lying on the floor. The manager shot a glacial glare at Vance. From what I've been able to hear, this gentleman has his accounts and companies frozen. It doesn't appear he has the solvency to pay. It's only logical that you, his companion, take care of the bill. No way! I came here to be treated. I don't carry $500 in my purse. Lorelei started shrieking. Vance, in turn, quickly pulled out his credit card and offered it to the manager. Here. Pay with this. It must still have a limit. The manager took the card silently and headed to the register. But he returned almost immediately to announce the harsh reality. I am very sorry. This card has been declined. No, it can't be. Vance's personal accounts and credit cards had already been frozen thanks to the swift actions of Gideon and Merritt. See? You don't even have a pot to piss in. You're the worst. Disgusting. Lorelei yelled at Vance, almost spitting on him. Vance grabbed the hem of Lorelei's dress, screaming, You ordered the champagne! You pay for it! And the two of them engaged in a ridiculous scuffle right in the entrance of the restaurant. The customers shot them icy glares, and the manager calmly warned them that he was going to call the police. It was the most miserable and pathetic ending for a couple who swore eternal love and dreamed of a brilliant future. I contemplated that hellish scene one last time and took a deep breath. The heavy clouds that had oppressed my heart for 20 years cleared up instantly, as if by magic. More than the joy of revenge, what filled my chest was the profound and serene relief of having finally gotten my own life back. Goodbye, Vance. I hope whatever's left of your life is a bit more honest, I murmured softly, almost to myself. I turned my back on them, leaving them fighting, and exited through the rear door of the restaurant. One of the waiters kindly opened the door for me. I gave a slight bow and walked out. The Chicago night was quite cold, but my heart was surprisingly warm. The touch of my new bank passbook and the key to the small apartment where I would live from now on, tucked in my purse, promised me a certain future. It was all over. I looked up at the starry sky, and in the clear autumn night, a cold but beautiful moon shone. I took a deep breath of fresh air and took the first step toward my new life. However, my battle hadn't completely concluded yet. The next morning, when I woke up in my new apartment, I received an unbelievable piece of news on my phone. It would be the news of Vance's last flailing attempt and the definitive coup de grace that would fall upon him. The next morning, I woke up to the soft sunlight slipping through the gap in the curtains. My new home was a small, 300-square-foot apartment in a 10-year-old building. Compared to the massive mansion in Winnetka, it was minuscule, but to me, every corner of this little room was full of freedom and peace. It was my own castle. I boiled water in the kitchen and quietly made myself some coffee. Until yesterday, I woke up at 5 a.m. to prepare low-sodium food for my mother-in-law, worried about her blood pressure, and served the dishes terrified of souring Vance's mood. But as of today, I no longer had to worry about anyone's expressions. I could use my time solely for myself. That simple fact slowly warmed my frozen heart. Just as I took a sip of coffee, my cell phone vibrated on the table. The screen displayed the name of my lawyer, Gideon. Good morning, Gideon. Thank you so much for everything yesterday. Upon answering, the lawyer's voice sounded calm and relieved. Good morning, Thalia. Did you sleep well? You see, early this morning they called me from the police precinct. About Vance. He's been arrested. Oh, really? It turned out that last night, in front of the restaurant, Vance and Lorelei had gotten into a physical altercation, and the police, alerted by the staff, took them away in a patrol car. There, Vance attempted his last dirty trick. According to what they told me, during the interrogation, Vance suddenly started screaming that his wife had stolen all his money, that the board of directors and his wife had conspired to take his company from him. He tried to file charges against Merritt and me for embezzlement. Utterly lost and panicked, the man tried one last, pathetic tactic to blame others for his woes. But don't worry, Gideon let out a small chuckle. Since I figured Vance was going to lose his mind, I had already spoken with a contact at the precinct. They notified me right away, and I presented the voice recording you made. The recording? From when he lied to me saying the loan guarantor form was company insurance? Exactly. Hearing how he deceived his wife to use her as a human shield, and knowing he mortgaged the company's assets to take out predatory loans of $1.2 million, the police didn't even entertain his complaint. On the contrary, they've opened a formal criminal investigation against him for mortgage fraud, identity theft, and corporate embezzlement. He's still in holding, and he's not getting out anytime soon. His last attempt to counterattack only served to tighten the noose around his own neck. Since no one has gone to post his bail, they say he's crying, begging for you in the interrogation room. He is a truly pathetic man. I see. I let out a silent sigh. The man I loved, with whom I swore to grow old. Imagining him crying miserably behind cold iron bars didn't stir a single emotion in me. It was like hearing the end of a distant tragedy that had nothing to do with me. Over the following weeks, that family's world collapsed completely. Vance was formally sued by the board of directors and ousted from his position as CEO. The $1.2 million debt fell on him as a personal liability, forcing him to file for bankruptcy. The impressive Winnetka estate was foreclosed on by the bank. From now on, he would have to live with a criminal record and hounded by debts, working whatever odd jobs he could find to survive in absolute solitude. Lorelei didn't escape unscathed either. All the luxury goods and money she had received from Vance came from embezzled funds, so the company filed a lawsuit demanding full restitution. Furthermore, I made sure to sue her for alienation of affection and emotional distress. The older gentleman who was going to be her next prey quickly discovered her police scandals and dumped her. She was fired from her job and vanished into the Chicago night burdened with debt. She, who tried to destroy the lives of others using only her youth and beauty, ended up paying a very high price for her audacity. And Opal? She continues to live in that decrepit state-run nursing home downstate. Apparently, at first she yelled at the staff saying, "I am the mother of a CEO. Take me to my luxury penthouse right now." But when the facility director explained that Vance was arrested and that they had lost the house, she finally understood reality and spent the entire night crying her eyes out. To her, who despised me for my humble origins and only cared about appearances, her son, her pride, had become a criminal. And the young daughter-in-law who flattered her was, from the start, a gold digger who only wanted her money. In this world, the only person who had cared for her with sincerity and worried about her health was me. I want to see Thalia one more time. I want to ask her for forgiveness. They say she murmurs that daily in her bed at the nursing home, but I will never set foot in that place again. At the end of November, when the cold wind began to blow, a letter arrived from the courthouse. It was the final divorce decree. With Vance's arrest and his unconditional surrender, the legal process, handled through our lawyers, had finally concluded. I looked at the paper silently and took a deep breath. My 20 years of marriage had definitively come to an end. That afternoon, I headed to a coffee shop where I had agreed to meet someone. Thalia! Upon entering, Merritt stood up to greet me. His face no longer reflected that shadowed exhaustion. Now he looked clear and radiant. Merritt, it's been a while. Have things calmed down at the company? Yes, thanks to you stopping the Capital flight, we managed to avoid the worst. Now we're leading a new era under a different name. None of the younger employees left. Merritt gave a deep bow. Thalia, truly, thank you so much. You saved our lives. No, I only closed a chapter of my own life. If the company was saved, it's because you and the others supported it honestly. Merritt looked at me with a sincere and somewhat hesitant expression. Thalia, if you wanted to, wouldn't you like to come back to work with us in accounting? Right now, we need someone as meticulous and precise as you. That warm offer brought a lump to my throat. For 20 years, I was treated like a useless burden in my own home, believing no one needed me. And now, someone was asking me to be by their side. Holding back tears, I gently shook my head. I appreciate it very much, Merritt. But from now on, I want to live my life peacefully, at my own pace, I responded with a smile. During my 20 years of marriage, I always lived for others, for my husband's company, to care for my mother-in-law. That's why, the time I have left in my life, I want to use it to fill my own heart. Recently, I had started working part-time at a small neighborhood flower shop. The pay wasn't very high, but spending my days surrounded by the smell of earth and flowers, arranging bouquets to make the customers smile, gave me astonishing peace. I see. If that is your decision, we will support you 100%. But come visit us whenever you want. We will always be on your side. I nodded warmly at Merritt's kind words. Leaving the coffee shop, I took a bus toward the cemetery where my parents were buried. The cold wind ruffled the yellow leaves of the trees. Standing in front of the well-kept headstone, I lit a candle. I closed my eyes and folded my hands. Mom, Dad, I'm sorry it took me so long to let you know. I finally got out of that family and now I'm on my own. A lot of things have happened. But I am doing very well. I'm glad I lived honestly and sincerely, exactly as you taught me. I opened my eyes and looked at my left hand. On my ring finger remained a faint, white mark from the ring I wore for 20 years. Neither that cheap silver ring nor the tens of thousands of dollars Diamond Vance tried to give his mistress were part of my life anymore. Surely, with time, this mark will also slowly fade away. Well, it's time to go home, I murmured, looking up at the sky. A blue sky, without a single cloud, stretched out infinitely. 48 years old, I still had half my life ahead of me. My steps were light, and my heart overflowed with a quiet hope toward my new days.